What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 7 waiver wire pickups, all the names you need to know, so make sure to tune in. And if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us as the week progresses. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter to get exclusive content. All the details in the description. But for now, let's get right into it. Before getting into our breakdowns, I want to give you guys a quick word from our sponsors at Overlay Fantasy Sports, who are taking DFS to a whole nother level. And I specifically want to highlight their matchup shop function, which is an absolute blast. In fact, we've been using it since the start of the NFL season because, let's face it, betting on the same old Team A versus Team B can get a little bit stale, a little bit boring. Well, that's not even close to being the case with the matchup shop of Overlay Fantasy, as it allows you to bet on individual player matchups, and it's super simple. Just pick whichever player you think will have the higher fantasy performance. And just like a regular bet would work, check out the spreads, do your research, and then win some money. You can bet on pretty much any single sport that you want, whether it's NFL, golf, MLB, etc. All those options are there. And again, super simple. Pretty much for any single NFL game coming up, you've got a bunch of different matchups that are always updated and added to. So if it's something as simple as just putting a single submission, you can do that. But guess what? If you want to get a parlay going and double up some of those winnings, you can do that as well. So take advantage of this. All of that homework you're doing for your fantasy lineups, let's have that translate to some big time winnings for your wallet as well. So do yourself a favor and check out Overlay Fantasy's matchup shop now. Starting at the quarterback position, we begin with Justin Herbert of the LA Chargers. Herbert coming off the bye week, so he might have been dropped in some of your leagues. And if that's the case, absolutely pick him up because he very well might be the best waiver wire option in Week 7 as he gets ready to face the Jacksonville Jaguars, who they were just lit up by the Detroit Lions. And honestly, that's been a trend that's been happening for several weeks now. That defense gives up a lot of points. And with Herbert, the permanent starter for the Chargers offensively, getting guys like Mike Williams back, Keenan Allen also expected to return, Hunter Henry, a lot of offensive weapons there. He's doing a great job of airing out the football. I really like the upside for Herbert in Week 7, potentially a low-end quarterback one. Next, we've got Washington's Kyle Allen, who this last week versus the Giants, 280 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Look, nothing all that sexy, all that impressive, but in Week 7, he will be facing the Dallas Cowboys defense, which pretty much since the start of the season has been giving up a bunch of points. And for Allen, I believe if you're in a league that's deeper in terms of quarterback ownership, then Allen might not be a bad option to stream, especially because he's really only going into his second, third week of being the starting quarterback. This is a decent matchup. I think he's going to be a mid-level quarterback 2 on the week. Our third and final quarterback is Carson Wentz of the Philadelphia Eagles. 213 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and then also 49 yards on the ground along with a rushing touchdown versus the Baltimore Ravens. And again, Carson Wentz, to kick off the season, wasn't all that impressive. And these last 2 weeks, it's taken until later points in the game for the Philadelphia offense to get it going. But again, the situation is there for a good matchup versus this Giants defense. Yes, the Eagles might be without Miles Sanders, but that might mean that Carson Wentz has to focus even more so on the passing attack. And if guys like an Alshon Jeffrey or a Deshaun Jackson return, then that's an even bigger boost for Carson Wentz. I think he will be a high-end quarterback 2 on the week. Moving on to our running backs, we actually have some decent options this week, and we begin with Boston Scott of the Philadelphia Eagles. And obviously the main reason that Boston Scott is appearing here is because Miles Sanders injured his knee in Week 6. We still don't know the severity of the injury, but my guess would be that on a short week where the Eagles have to play on Thursday night, they are probably going to be a little bit more cautious. And even though Boston Scott didn't do really all that much this last week versus the Ravens, I expect a much different script versus the New York Giants. This is a defense that is beatable. And we saw last year when Boston Scott needed to be that next man up, he was fairly successful. So I think if Miles Sanders doesn't go, then Boston Scott is a high-end RB2. Next up, we have got Gio Bernard of the Bengals, who finds himself in a very similar situation as Boston Scott because the primary running back for the Bengals, Joe Mixon, got nicked up this last week, and he was in and out of the lineup, but ultimately towards the end of the game, it was Gio Bernard that was getting the carries. So obviously, we have to wait to see what the severity of the injury is and how the Bengals approach it. But if Mixon doesn't play, man, you have to love the upside for Gio Bernard. Yes, it's a bit of a tough matchup versus the Cleveland Browns, but we've seen it before. When Mixon has been hurt, Gio Bernard is a great start, arguably an RB1, because what he can do as a pass catcher, so primarily in PPR type of leagues. But again, if you guys need a short-term victory and Joe Mixon is out, the news come out early, then Bernard is someone that I really like for Week 7. Our third and final running back is Lamical Perine of the New York Jets. And obviously the main reason Perine is here is due to the release of Le'Veon Bell, which means more opportunities for these other running backs. Now, yes, Frank Gore will be the guy that benefits in the short term, but in the long term, a lot of people, including us, believe that Perine could be the guy. Now, obviously, he's not in the situation of a Gaskin or a Robinson or a Gibson, but the fact remains that in a situation where the running back depth is so bleak, especially off of waivers, Perine could be someone you take a chance on down the stretch. We wouldn't play him this week versus the Buffalo Bills. Very tough matchup. But again, down the stretch, we expect him to get more opportunities, and he could be a benefit to your roster. Before continuing, I want to tell you guys a little bit about a new partner of ours in Thrive Fantasy, which is an absolutely awesome daily fantasy sports app that specializes in player props. And the great thing about Thrive Fantasy is that it's super simple to use, as they've eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in a respective sport. Literally, all you have to do is find a contest and join it. From there, just select the props you like and rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. And it's not just the NFL. There's NBA, MLB, PGA. Literally, you think it, Thrive Fantasy has it. In fact, Thrive has awarded over $1.5 million in prizes since launching in 2018 and has $50,000 guaranteed in prizes weekly. So sign up today, and when you use promo code ALLDAY on sign up, you receive an instant match bonus up to $50. You can download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store, Play Store, or by visiting their website, thrivefantasy.com. So stop waiting, sign up today, use promo code ALLDAY, and start propping up today. Getting to our wide receivers, we begin with Tim Patrick of the Denver Broncos. And Patrick has kind of made people forget about the loss of Courtland Sutton, about another young wide receiver like a KJ Hamler. It's pretty much been him and Jerry Jeudy. In fact, Patrick, you could argue, has looked better these last few weeks, especially in Week 6 versus the Patriots. 4 receptions for 101 yards. And with the return of Drew Lock, maybe a little bit of a higher ceiling, we'd see if he's still available off of waivers. Offers probably high-end wide receiver 3 type of value. The matchup versus the Chiefs in Week 7 is tough, but you assume that the Chiefs will score a bunch of points, so the Broncos will need to air it out. Patrick should see some opportunities yet again. Next up, we've got Mike Williams of the Chargers, who, just like Justin Herbert, is coming off the bye week as the Chargers get ready to face the Jacksonville Jaguars in Week 7. And again, this is a matchup that we absolutely love. Now, for what it's worth, we don't think the ceiling for Mike Williams will be as high as it was versus the New Orleans Saints, because that was a game where Keenan Allen exited relatively early, so Mike Williams became, that next man up. But for what it's worth, keep an eye out on the Keenan Allen injury. Back spasms, so doesn't sound too serious. Regardless, though, this entire offense is much better with Justin Herbert under center compared to a Tyrod Taylor. And with Mike Williams back healthy in a very positive matchup, he should be a decent start, especially in standard scoring. Our third and final wide receiver is Breshad Perriman of the New York Jets, who finally returned healthy this last week and had a decent stat line, 4 receptions, 62 yards, but he did see a good amount of targets, and whether it's Joe Flacco or Sam Darnold under center, Perriman should be getting opportunities. Now, obviously, he won't get as many targets as a Jamison Crowder, who is the clear-cut #1 wide receiver for the New York Jets, but Perriman is that next guy up, and with the Jets probably trailing a bunch in future games, especially this next week versus the Buffalo Bills, then that means Perriman should have some opportunities as long as he stays healthy. He's not a bad high-end wide receiver 3 type of guy because mainly of volume. Moving on to our tight ends, we start with Hayden Hurst of the Atlanta Falcons, who finally returned to relevancy this last week. Again, 4 receptions, 57 yards, and the all-important touchdown. Now, we could argue how much of that was because the Falcons played the Minnesota Vikings defensively, and maybe some of it had to do with the departure of Dan Quinn and the opportunities now that this offense will have that weren't there before. Either way, though, this is another good matchup for Hayden Hurst in Week 7 versus the Detroit Lions. Even if the Atlanta Falcons' offensive resurgence is short-lived, there's a good chance that they can duplicate some of those efforts versus the Minnesota Vikings. I think Matt Ryan has another decent game, and I do think Hayden Hurst, especially in the red zone, could be a nice target. So I like him as a mid-level tight end 2 on Week 7. Our second and final tight end is Logan Thomas of Washington, who kind of started off the year as a popular pickup, then went quiet, and then finally kind of reemerged this last week. 3 receptions, 42 yards, and a touchdown versus the Giants, and now gets another great matchup versus the Dallas Cowboys defense. After Terry McLaurin and some of those running backs, I believe Logan Thomas is that next preferred option for Kyle Allen. And with Kyle Allen under center, I do think the ceiling is higher for Logan Thomas compared to a Dwayne Haskins. So in this friendly matchup, I think he's a decent mid-level tight end too. And finally, getting to our defenses, we begin with the Buffalo Bills, who might single-handedly be the most important waiver wire pickup of Week 7, because that's right, you guessed it, they play the New York Jets. We say it every single week. Whichever defense plays the Jets, you pick them up. We saw it with the Dolphins this last week. The Bills, arguably a better defense, and offensively, if they go up big, then that's going to mean a lot of forced passes, which means more turnover opportunities for this defense. And in fact, you could potentially stash them right now prior to them playing on Monday. That would be a huge win for you, not even having to wait for waivers in Week 7. Our second and final defense is the Philadelphia Eagles, who will be facing the New York Giants in Week 7. And the Giants, yes, they just put up 20 points versus Washington, but other than that, they really haven't been in all that many high-scoring games, and that bodes well for the Philadelphia defense. On top of that, we know what the MO for Daniel Jones is. The guy stays too long in the pocket, takes some unnecessary hits, and most importantly, he is very turnover-prone. We believe the Eagles defense can take advantage of this, and they are a relatively good play for Week 7. So with that, we wrap up this Week 7 waiver wire breakdown, and as always, let us hear it in the comment section. Did you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you might have? We will do our best to answer them. And in the meantime, if you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe. Also, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there. Shoot us your questions. We'll make sure to answer them. And check us out online at alldaypigskin.com. Sign up for our free newsletter to get free exclusive content. All the details in the description. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.